Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Career Discovery live stream presentation on careers in education, becoming a teacher. My name is Amanda Waidula, University and Student Development Coordinator at the Bank of North Dakota, and I will be facilitating today's webinar. During today's session, attendees will learn about careers in education from educators themselves. Our panelists today have a range of experience from new to veteran teachers and have quite the range of experience within their careers. Just some housekeeping items in the menu of the webinar. There is a Q&A function that we will encourage all of you to use for your questions or comments that you have about today's webinar. We will answer them both throughout the webinar and at the end, so please put them in the Q&A when you have them so that you don't forget. We have 3 panelists today. Lindsay Bunn was born and raised in Enderlin, North Dakota. She attended Enderlin Area School for her K-12 career and is excited to be back there now as a teacher and coach. She attended Valley City University, where she majored in elementary education with endorsements in STEM and coaching. She is currently teaching 3rd grade at Enderlin Area School and is the assistant girls basketball coach. Jessie Smet is a Bismarck native and graduate of Century High School. She is the library media specialist at Northern Cass currently. She received her undergraduate degree from the University of Jamestown with a major in elementary education with an early childhood concentration and a minor in character and leadership. She completed her Master's of Education in Curriculum and Instruction and is currently pursuing her Library and Information Technology certificate. And last but not least, we have Carmen Wall, who is in her 10th year of teaching. She taught her first 2 years at Wachter Middle School in Bismarck and has been at Bismarck High School for the last 8 years. She's certified to teach 5th through 8th grade math. She's always wanted to be a teacher and loves working with students to help them reach their fullest potential in school and life. She obtained her bachelor's degree in math education from Dickinson State University on the BSC campus. So welcome to our panelists. All right, so our first panel question today. So why did you go into education, and what was maybe that defining moment when you decided to become a teacher? So Carmen, just because you're first on my screen, we'll have you answer first.
Sorry. As far as why I decided to go into education, I've always enjoyed working with kids and teaching. I've made my brother and sister play school since before they were in school. But I just really love being around young adults and helping them further their idea of what life is going to look like for them. So that's why I'm at there.
Awesome. Jessie.
Yeah, my answer is very similar to Carmen's. I just knew I wanted to do something with kids. I've always loved reading and learning, and teaching allows you to stay curious your entire career, and you never stop learning, as I've modeled since I'm still in graduate courses. I've pretty much never stopped taking classes since graduating high school. So education is a great field if you enjoy learning and want to continue to build on your knowledge and then share it with others.
Great. And Lindsay.
Yeah, mine's kind of the same idea. I've always loved helping kids, from classmates to siblings and kids I babysat, and I just wanted to continue to do that. My defining moment was probably in 4th grade. I had an autistic boy join my class, and the teacher kind of let me work with him on just about everything, and I kind of stuck through working with him all through my rest of my grade or schooling, and it just made me realize I really wanted to help kids just like him. So
Awesome. All right, so our next question, and I know this question is probably, we're kind of laughing at it. What has changed in education since you started your career, especially if you're in your first couple years? Well, there's a lot that's changed in the last year, right? But, you know, what are kind of some other things that have changed since you began? Oh, and Carmen, yeah, we'll have you go.
Yep. For me, the things I think that have changed the most in the last 10 years are not that technology has necessarily changed, but the amount of access kids have to technology on a daily basis is probably one of the biggest things. And then the other one that I would also think has changed a lot is, at least in Bismarck High, class sizes have gotten a lot larger. So those are my two things that I think that I've noticed the most that have changed in education setting. It's just the amount of technology kids get to use and play with on a daily basis and the size of classes.
Okay. And about how many students do you have in your average class, Carmen?
If you're in a regular classroom setting, it's anywhere between like 24 to 32, usually closer to 30. And then I do coach a couple of classes, and ours are usually in the 50s, so they're pretty large or more.
Yeah.
So, but they
Wow.
vary.
And Jesse?
I think probably the biggest shift I've seen since starting as a teacher is a change to my district is standards-based grading now. So we used to, when I first started, I would give an assignment, grade it out of however many points. For the things kids didn't get correct, you docked points, and their grade went into the grade book as a percentile. It was averaged out, and that was your grade. Pretty much how I went to school, my whole experience as a student. But now, since we are standards-based grading, all of students' assignments are tied to specific standards, and they are graded on their proficiency. So it's no longer just kind of a mystery of like, well, you got a 85% in this class, so you kind of know your ELA standards. Now it's okay, I know for sure that you really struggled with main idea, but you know how to cite text evidence really well. So really knowing more in depth where kids are at in their learning has been the biggest shift for me.
Okay. And Lindsay?
Yeah, as a first year teacher, I guess, from practicums and stuff, it was mainly just like the whole COVID issues that we've had to adjust with. Realizing that this is not what a normal year would look like, as far as the separating kids, not allowing them to work on in groups as often, where beforehand a lot of group work is done. But going from schooling to now, the amount of technology, like Carmen said, is crazy. How just about everything can be done, from math to reading on an iPad or a computer, and trying to find that amount of time that they should be using on those and not overwhelming them with all of that technology, because you know how much they get at home too. So you got to find that balance is probably the biggest thing.
Absolutely. Wonderful. So we did have a question from one of the folks who's listening live. Is it easier to work with kids at bigger schools or smaller schools? Or I suppose, larger classes or smaller classes? And anybody can answer this one.
I would say if you have a smaller class, or if you're a smaller school, the perk is that you can build relationships probably faster and maybe that lasts longer. I think the key is, no matter what size class or school you're at, is to build really good relationships with the students that you have.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think I would always choose a smaller class size over a larger class size. I don't know many educators that would opt to have more students, just because those relationships are so important, just to really know your kids on a human level beyond just as a student and as a learner. So I think smaller class sizes are definitely beneficial. Whether those smaller class sizes are at a large school or a small school, to me matters a little bit less. I think kids are kids no matter where you go. But yeah, I think smaller class sizes are definitely a better learning environment for everybody.
Yeah, I would agree with that one. I have 13 kids in my room, and it's so much nicer to have that ability to work more one-on-one time with those kids, or smaller groups, instead of having like 25 kids in the classroom and not meeting all their needs.
And Jesse, you're kind of, I'm just going to call you a specialist, maybe not in the way that like a music or an art teacher is a specialist, but you
Mhm.
literally get to work with every single student in the
Yes.
school instead of having your like designated, like 25 kids, so to speak. So how
Yeah.
has that been different this year, since it's your first year versus when you were a classroom teacher?
Yeah, that's honestly one of the best parts of being a specialist, of having a job like a librarian or a gym teacher or a technology teacher is you don't lose the kids when they move to the next grade level. Like you're still there with them, and you can build on those good relationships. And you get to see siblings and all that kind of fun stuff. So yeah, I have loved getting to work with all grade levels at my school. My school is pre-K through 12. So it's a wide range, and there's tricky things having to make a space work for a preschooler and work for a senior in high school, and dividing your time evenly. There's certainly challenges, but it's so rewarding to get to keep those kids their whole education. I love it.
That's really, really cool. All right. So, and just a reminder for everyone who's listening today, you can submit your questions in the questions box and we'll answer them throughout as well as at the end of the webinar. All right. So, our next question is, what do you find the most challenging about your job? And we put the caveat in a normal year because obviously it's a weird time right now. So, obviously, there's been a lot of challenges in a lot of ways. But during a normal year, what do you find the most challenging about your work as an educator?
I think the most challenging thing for me is, or hurdle to get over, is that to remember that I can only control what happens to kids in my classroom or like on the school grounds. And there's a lot of things that happen outside of our classroom on a regular basis that can hinder or help our students' success. And to like get over the hurdles of how to best help them when they're in our classroom and encourage them to do other things that might help them outside of the classroom, but how to really work and appreciate and work with what you have and not worry about, I shouldn't say not worry, but not linger on the things that you can't control for your kids.
Yeah, I think one of the more challenging things about education, especially post-COVID, is setting that boundary. Now that every educator has an email, high school students can reach out via email to their teachers, parents can reach out, and a lot of times that's great. Like most of the time, the more communication, the better. But there are times where I've struggled to set that boundary of like, okay, it's, Saturday afternoon, I don't need to respond to this parent email, kind of that sort of thing. That was really tricky, especially my first couple years in education, really understanding those boundaries and helping parents and students understand those boundaries too. I would tell parents, like, you wouldn't call your dentist on a Saturday and expect them to make an appointment for you and clean your teeth. So like you can't expect that of educators as well. So I think setting those boundaries is so important, especially as new educators.
Awesome. Lindsay.
Yeah, I would say parent communication is probably one of the biggest things. Parents, like Jesse said, wanting to communicate at all kinds of times or like not responding to communications is always a tricky one. And like Carmen said, you can only control so much. So knowing when to like, yep, you can control what happens in school, but it's not like you can make the parents respond or care if their homework's turned in or things like that. And just finding those boundaries to set and understand that just that's how it's going to be. And some parents will go above and beyond and some will not. So
Hmm.
that's probably the most challenging I've had.
Okay. So to, flip it, or let's see. Oh, okay. I was like, I thought we had a different question. So what do you like most about your job as an educator?
100% working with kids, like the students, they're by far the best part. Like I always tell people, I love what I do from 7:30 to 3:30. It's the stuff outside of 7:30 to 3:30 that isn't as much fun. But being in the classroom with kids, seeing what they can do outside of your classroom, whether it's in their arts or music or sports, just being around the kids is definitely the best part.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my job as the school librarian, I tell my coworkers all the time, like, I have the best job in the school. Like, it is so nice to just get kind of that protected time with kids, to build relationships with them, talk about books, talk about technology, find out their passions and interests. And then, like I said earlier, just getting to watch them grow up. My first class, my very first year, is now juniors this year. So just seeing them kind of make college plans, that kind of stuff. It's so exciting. And, you know, I feel so proud of my students, watching them grow. So yeah, being with the kids and just, you know, really, you go into education to hopefully make a positive difference in the lives of kids. So when you actually get to see that, it's so rewarding.
Yeah, same thing. Working with the kids, getting to see, helping them succeed in things, seeing when things click in their mind and like that they finally know what's going on, to see the sparks go off on a new concept or something along those lines. That's probably the most enjoyable thing about the job, is just you get that time with the kids and giving them time to just be kids too.
Awesome. So this is kind of similar but different question. So most of you have worked with a bunch of different age ranges working in small schools. You know, have exposure to different grades. And actually, teaser for tomorrow, we have another webinar on education about specifically about teaching at different grade levels. But since each of you have worked with different you know, middle school, elementary, you know, the whole range, is there a certain grade or age range that you just holds like a special place in your heart to teach, or do you just kind of like everyone? It makes it sound like you don't like anyone, but you know, so some people just like really like have a love for, you know, those crazy 13-year-olds, you know.
I would say just as a like high school and middle school, like because I haven't taught elementary, just high school and middle school. Love, I would say either. I really enjoy both. It just happens that I'm at the high school, enjoy this range of kids. I always say that elementary school teachers are saints because they have the same kids all day long for 8 hours. I see mine for like a max of 2 hours. Um, so that is kind of, I think I enjoy the refreshing like mix of lots of kids throughout the day. Not necessarily the age, just that I get to see a lot more kids and see a lot of different things. But I'm definitely a high school, middle school. That's where I find my fancy anyways.
Yeah, when I was pursuing my undergrad degree, I thought like kindergarten is my jam. Like I was so excited to student teach in kindergarten, and then I student taught and was like, oh, like this is not exactly what I thought it was going to be. And I did a student teaching experience in fourth grade and was like, oh, like this is it. So fourth grade is definitely like that kind of sweet spot in my heart. Like I love that they're independent, you know, like you're not tying shoes and that kind of stuff. They're all potty trained, which is amazing. But I taught 1 year in sixth grade, and that was a rough year. Those middle school kids, like that really takes a special soul. You know, the hormones are raging and all the trends, like they are the peak coolness, and teachers are peak lameness. So yeah, definitely that upper elementary was my sweet spot when I was in the classroom.
Yeah, same here. From practicums and stuff, it's upper elementary is what I like. The lowers is just too much hands-on. Like, I'm not very much, they're not very independent. Too much of needing things.
Awesome. Thank you. I love hearing people's different perspectives on the different grades and the specific reasons why. So, yeah, I just had to know, even though we're going to discuss that with a different group of panelists tomorrow. So, our next question is, what is something about your job that you didn't expect when you went into it? Or maybe something that is different than you expected?
I think for me, the biggest thing that I feel like for any job, you have a picture, an idea of what this job is going to look like, but you never really fully understand what it is until you're in the trenches doing it. And my biggest thing is the amount of workload you do outside of working with kids. Like, hit me really hard. Like, during student teaching, I figured it out, but that is the biggest thing, like the amount of work you put in outside of 7:30 to 3:30 or whenever you're contracted with kids. That's probably the biggest thing that I knew there was some, but I didn't expect it to be as much as there was.
And Carmen, do you think that your time outside of the school day, do you feel like you spent more time like developing your lesson plans and that kind of thing, like in your first few years of teaching, or has it kind of been like a constant throughout
Um,
your entire career?
I think the first few years are like definitely the most difficult because you're really, for the most part, starting from scratch unless you have like like, I don't get me wrong, had lots of things from other people. I also think that if you're changing a grade or changing a subject, like that can give you, again, like, I feel like a class is never perfected either. So you're like always making changes. You're like, oh, that was awful. Next year I need to change this. I do think though, as you go along, there's not as much. It's not like you have to do everything. It's like, oh, this year I'm really going to focus on tweaking this unit on parabolas because I wasn't really a fan of how it went down this year, and I really want to tweak it to make it better. It's more of like little tweaks instead of like, oh, I have to create a full lesson. Or else it's maybe just like, oh, I'm starting one new class, but I have 2 classes that I've already taught in the past. But yeah, but then also on the other end, like, not always creating, but like the grading part, I think people don't always put into account that you hand out one assignment, but I get 100 back.
Yeah.
So like, that's how that works there.
Sure.
That's the biggest thing, just the time management. That's a little bit different. Time management and just what you're expecting to do at home that you never see when you're just observing. All the things you don't see teachers do when you're observing or if you're a student.
Okay. Jessie.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I really didn't know until I was actually teaching how much out of class time it takes to pair a lesson that seems pretty straightforward and pretty simple. There is a lot of thought and care that goes into it. So that time was an adjustment. I would say being a teacher, really, I'd never realized how many like quick, fast decisions you have to make as a teacher every single day. Like I might be giving a lesson and I'm looking out at my kids and thinking like, okay, is he zoning out? Like, is he with me? What do I need to do to get his attention? Like, okay, those two are touching each other. Like tomorrow they're not sitting by each other anymore. Like this kid doesn't look like they're feeling so good. Like, do I need to check in with them? There's a lot going on all the time. And I feel like even elementary, middle, high school, like just because they're maturing doesn't mean the educators aren't still being really thoughtful as they're giving that lesson. And I think really great teachers have that with itness, that they kind of have a good vibe check on the room. So just all of those really quick in the moment decisions was something I did not expect before being a teacher.
And Lindsay, this is your first year, so you probably have a lot of good stuff.
Yes, definitely the time management is a big thing. Like realizing like, oh, I can't just whip that out quick in 30 minutes. Like I should have looked at that beforehand, and then realizing like, oh, I got some more time. And especially with coaching, like getting a schedule down to understand like you don't get that time after school anymore, so then you have to spend more time at home. And that might be at 10:30 when you get home from a basketball game. Just coming up with the schedule that's always changing because all of a sudden you have a meeting the next morning and you didn't know about it, and that was maybe your prep time, so you have to try and squeeze it in some other time, and that's probably the biggest challenge. And yeah, just like Jess said, like you're getting quick decisions all the time, like, oh, this kid's doing this, I gotta make that stop, so this kid has to go to speech, this kid has to go over to a different thing. Like you don't realize like all those little things that kids go to, and that you're responsible for sending them to that because they don't always remember, and so you have to find a way to organize that. So
Absolutely. So we do have a couple questions from our attendees, and this first one will be a little quickie. What is your favorite part of the school year?
No, it's hard.
getting to spend time with the kids, like 100% face to face, because I started subbing these kids last year when their teacher was on maternity leave, and so then we went online for since March on, and that was hard, like not seeing their faces and relying on seeing them on the internet. And some kids would show up to the meetings, and some kids wouldn't. So I guess my favorite part is seeing them come every day and getting to teach them in person.
I think there's a lot of teachers. One of my best friend, she's a music teacher in Minnesota, and that was exactly the same thing that she said, that she just missed seeing those kids every day and seeing their faces. So, yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's just those little moments of connection, you know, when a kindergartner is like, oh my gosh, I lost a tooth and here it is. Like, it's just those, you know, funny things that like you never really thought you'd be doing that today, but here you are doing it. Yeah, just those relationships that you build. Those are the things that you kind of tuck away for a rainy day when teaching can be rough some days. So those little connections are my favorite part of the job.
I'd agree, especially the unexpected ones. Or like if you've been trying to get a kid to work, I don't know, for 6 months, and then they ask you for help. You're like, oh, yes, what can I do for you? Those are good
Yeah.
days.
So I think we did have another question, and I think you kind of covered it, but if you want to share another story, please do. What's the best experience you had with a student, or maybe something that was just a little extra special?
There's been a lot. I think especially the longer you're in education, you know, certain classes you really vibe with and just have a lot of good memories with. I would say something that really like touched me was on my birthday. My coworkers did like a little banner outside my door so all the students knew it was my birthday. But the students I had like 2 years before came back and like hid in my room. And then when I walked in, like jumped out and sang happy birthday to me. And it was just so special. I had them when they were fourth graders, and then they were like really cool sixth graders. But the fact that they came back and, you know, wished me happy birthday, it was like, oh, really, that was really touching to me.
Oh, that is sweet.
I think mine are like, I mean, all fun experiences are great, but I think my ones that I like the most are when kids come back after they've left high school and they're like, you really impacted me, or I really liked you as a teacher, or I appreciated when you did like things you don't think that are important that you do every day, and you just like interact with kids and say hi and ask them how they're doing. Like when kids come back and they're like, well, in my case, basically adults, like after college, and they're like, I just really like, I loved your class because you did this. And those are the things that are like, oh, and it reminds you to make sure that you keep doing those things, even though sometimes those are the things that are like the extra that you forget about sometimes. So you're like, oh, be very cognitive about what you're doing and like how you interact with kids, because that can make the world a difference.
Yeah, and like my favorites, like when they come in the morning, they have to tell you about the most important thing, and they just that 2 minutes of time is so crucial for those younger kids because they just maybe didn't get the chance to say it at home, but that you will listen to them and they think that's the world. Like today, one kid had got a new note from the tooth fairy, and they had to run in my room this morning and be like, "Look at this note!" and like, but it was so cool for them to see that like I cared about it, talked to them about it, and then they could go on with their day. So.
Awesome. Cool. So another question that came through is about classroom management. So should you go over the rules of your classroom on the first day of school, and then just a little extra, how often do you have to go over those rules of your classroom or tweak them or whatever?
From a high school standpoint, you would think that you could just like go over one time and it'd be solid, but I would say to really get, I don't even want to call them rules. Mine are more procedures and expectations, with maybe a couple of rules like swearing, obviously a rule. But just your classroom expectation and procedures. I guess I address them a lot. I do start like usually on the first day because they get really overwhelmed. First day is more introductions, but like second day, and then just honestly, like for the first semester, like remind kids of procedures probably on a daily basis. I mean, maybe not whole group, but individuals or some whole group are just reminders of how the class works. Um, for high school students and middle school students, I say it takes like a semester, and then it becomes a pretty well-oiled machine.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember, like, there is no perfect classroom management system. Like, no matter what you do, no matter how much those kids like you, what relationship you've built, like, kids are kids and kids can be naughty sometimes, and sometimes they're going to choose to be naughty. You know, even high schoolers, like, those brains are still developing, that executive functioning is not fully developed. So, you know, my belief is kids like structure, they like boundaries, they like having those procedures in place. It helps create a environment where people feel safe, they know what's expected, and that's a better learning environment than, well, maybe I'll get away with this today and maybe I won't. So I would say whatever, you know, rules or procedures, expectations you have as an educator, try to be consistent with them, because that's ultimately how your kids are going to, one, know that it's a rule, not to break it, and respect you, but it will help them feel safe in your classroom as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same in elementary. Go over it many times. Like, you can drill them hard right away, but then you still remind them just about daily. And then after, big breaks is when you really have to go over them again, like Christmas break and spring break and all those things. You have to remind them, like, oh, we're still in school.
So, needless to say, you'll be going over that again next Tuesday
Yep.
after this little Easter break here. Wonderful. All right, so this last question is one that I always ask of all of our panelists at the end. What advice would you give to a student, or I suppose an adult, a current college student who's either who's considering a career in education?
If you're considering it, my biggest advice is get in classrooms as much as you can. You'll figure out what you like to teach, what levels you like to teach, um, tips and tricks, steal big, borrow steal. That's, I mean, from everybody and anybody you see, but get in the classrooms as much as possible because you'll really find out if you love it or if it's maybe not the right path for you.
Yeah, for sure. I would say, if you're considering a career in education, just know that it is a lot of work. You know, even when you love kids, it is a job, and it is a lot of work, and it's a lot of work of heart. Some days can be kind of emotionally draining, but ultimately I think it is one of the most fulfilling and rewarding jobs you can choose. Getting to positively impact kids who will then grow up and be decision making adults. I don't know that there's a more important job in the world. Education, I think, is the job that makes all other jobs possible. So I think it's a very noble profession, but you got to be willing to hustle and to work hard. So that's what I would tell a prospective education student.
Yeah, and like Carmen said, get in the classrooms. Like, that was a big thing for me. Many practicums in college, student teaching, going and visiting different classrooms in the school that you're at, going to different schools. Um, just getting that time in to see what's going to be your fit when you start applying for jobs and knowing what you're interested in. But yeah, spend the time with kids, get to know them, and know like what you're going to be doing daily to make sure that that's something that you are able to handle. But yeah, every day is different. Like, there is not a day that is the same. There's always a new challenge or something thrown at you that you just don't know.
Wonderful. Well, that was great advice. And thank you for lending your expertise today to our attendees. So, attendees, thank you for joining us today as well. Our next career discovery webinar is Thursday, so tomorrow, April 1st, same time, 4 p.m. Central Standard Time. And like I mentioned earlier, it's also on education, but we'll be talking to educators about teaching at the different grade levels. So we have panelists who will talk specifically about elementary, middle school, and high school, and some different content areas as well. And then next week on Tuesday, April 6th, while our lovely panelists are rehashing the expectations in their classrooms, we will be having a presentation on careers in welding. So that'll be next Tuesday, April 6th at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time. And as always, you can register for these and all Career Discovery webinars on the Career Discovery tab on our Career Compass website. You can also view all past presentations there as well. All right, well, thanks again to our panelists. Thank you for joining us today, and we will see you next time. Bye.